So let's relax and gather together to talk about creative approaches to supporting people with advancing dementia. And my name is Louise Kelly. I work at the Care About Physical Activity on the programme at the Care Inspectorate. And we're continuing our quest to explore how we can all live our good lives, keeping active, connected, and doing the things that matter. And what happens when we're at this age and stage in life when we're living with dementia, which is maybe naturally progressing, or we have a significant cognitive impairment? How can we ensure that all of us live our good life at every stage and are connected as well as we can be? And this includes people, and there will be those of us who will experience this as well, people who communicate without using words. And today is a time for stories and of approaches that worked. And I will introduce people as we go along. We've various people. We've Jenny in the background who's doing all the technical things. Anaj, you'll hear his voice in a minute and you'll meet him as we go along. And I'll introduce the other folk as well. So we have quite a packed schedule, and that's because there's so many good stories to tell. And these are stories from people like yourselves, people out in the sector. And I want to thank you very much for coming along, because I know you're very, very busy and there's, huge pressures on the sector and on yourselves. And the fact that you're here today and you've carved this time out of your busy life really shows your commitment. And we're always continually encouraged and just so thankful for your work and the work that you're doing. And there may be some technical issues. Sometimes there is. We'll just keep going. We will be recording it and sending it out to you in a couple of weeks. And let's just go to the next slide, Jenny. But let's get ready to put your thoughts forward, because we want to buckle up and we want to, get yourself a pen and paper ready as well. So that you, as we go through, you can take down the things that you think would work for you or that you could try or whatever. So I've mentioned this already, but if you've just come on board, if you have a smartphone, or you can join us at that by using your web browser, there's www.aha slides, etc. at the bottom there, or you can take your smartphone, open the camera, scan, just hold it up to that QR code, click on the text that pops up, and that will take you to this page. Okay. So let's give it a try. If we go on to the third slide there, Jenny, and just here's a question for you. And if you have this on your phone, you can pop in what part of the country you're calling in from, and we should see it appear in front of you. It is all anonymous, so anything that you share with us today doesn't have your name on it. Woo! So we've people from Aberdeen and West Lothian, Mid Lothian, Perth, the UK. That's a big one that you're covering there in the UK. Ellen up in Aberdeenshire. That's great, fabulous, really, really lovely. Now we're talking. Hopefully you found out how to use your phone. We will put the QR code into the chat every now and again. And I know there's people using the chat instead of this. So there's folk from Aberdeen and Fife and so on in the chat. But it's lovely to be able to see in one fell swoop all of your ideas and your thoughts as we go along. So we're going to ask you one more question, which is on the next slide. And that is, we're talking about, creative approaches when supporting people with advancing dementia. So we'd love to find out what springs to mind when you hear that term. What is it? Anything at all. And remember, your words will come up here, and you can pop in your thoughts. So some people have done this already. You can pop it in a word or a sentence. And if you've just joined us and you're not sure what on earth is happening, there is a QR code that you can scan with your phone, and things will come up here. So Anaj, over to you. What are we seeing? Maybe you could synopsize that.
If I can mute myself. Compassion, confusion, sadness, loss of routine, changing in what seems to be the baseline for a person. People mentioning decline and fear, loneliness and confusion that comes with it. Diminished well-being, some really, really interesting, powerful feelings being expressed, the long trajectory, carer fatigue, which is kind of quite an interesting one to point out. Agitation and anger, as you would expect, as some other things. Loss of verbal skills, regression of reality and basic living abilities. Fear and anxiety is coming up a lot, and some issues with memory as expected, poor memory and memory loss. Some mention about the person being a bit more distant and communication difficulties that kind of go with it, and additional support and a cognitive decline. So yeah, and people also mentioning in the chat about living grief, which is kind of sometimes quite an important thing that we, it can be from both perspectives, from the carer's perspective, who's looking at the person, losing the person, and sometimes from the person's perspective, and they have insight into them losing themselves.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Really interesting.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Anaj. Well, your experiences and your thoughts there are so apt. And I'm going to pass over to Maureen Cosser. Maureen is a mental health nurse, senior improvement advisor with a focus on dementia, working at the Care Inspectorate. And if we go on to the next slide, and Maureen is going to take us through some of the background before we move on to our stories as to things that have worked for people. So over to you, Maureen, if you could just unmute yourself.
Thanks, Louise, and apologies, my camera was off and on as I tried to get you so you were able to see me, but I could still see yous. Actually, the words which struck a chord was how sad some of them were, and I seen the wee sad faces coming up. So it's really important, it's vital that we get it right for people with advancing and advanced dementia. We're going to look at this slide first, just to have a wee brief overview about what we mean about advancing and advanced dementia. We know there's many different types of dementia, but the common factor is that they all affect the brain's function. It's a brain disease. Different parts of the brain can be affected, which results in different symptoms. It's a progressive condition. And over time, more and more of the person's brain is affected, which can result sometimes in them needing more care. But they may be unable to voice what their needs are. Engaging in inclusion can become more difficult, and the person may appear distant, or they might be showing more signs of stress and distress. Next slide, please, Jenny. So let's have a look at how dementia can affect a person's memory. Memory is stored in different parts of the brain, so not all memory may be affected, although over time we see more and more of the person's memory fading. Interestingly, memory for music is one of the last memories to go, so always bear that in mind. So how does memory work? Firstly, we have sensory memory, and that's basically what senses have been triggered, what they're telling us. And this lasts for seconds, and then it either goes or it stays with that short-term memory. The short-term memory, as it says in the tin, is our memory of recent times, the here and now, an hour ago, yesterday, a week ago. However, our brain can't store everything, so it then decides if the memory is important to us. If not, it lets it go. But if it is, it moves on into a long-term memory. The long-term memory is grouped into 3 different types. Episodic is a memory of events. See the special occasions like the birth of your child, although some people may not want to remember that. Their wedding day, again, and nice events, but equally special events that maybe weren't so nice. A somatic memory is a memory of facts and knowledge, so hopefully that's the one that's been stimulated right now for everybody. And our procedural is a memory of those processes we carry out, things like making a cup of tea, riding a bike, driving a car. A lot of the things that we often do automatically. So when we want to retrieve memories, we can either have that free recall that comes without a prompt, such as you go into an exam, see the question and you can answer it right away, or the recognition, and that's where something prompts a memory, a clue, like one of your senses, and how you smell something, smelling carbolic soap, and it makes you different people think of different things because it triggers different memories in them. Or like that exam again, where you're given an option, A, B, or C, and that prompts your answer. Knowing this can help us think about how best we can support someone with dementia. Short-term memory is less likely to be stored when someone has dementia, and as dementia progresses, long-term memory begins to fade, with those things that happened last fading first. Initially, that can be a bit sporadic, but as dementia progresses, you may witness this becoming the person's reality. For instance, someone worrying about their children who aren't home from school when in fact they're in their 60s. But that helps us to understand where the person is in their memory chain. Try thinking about recognition to help communication. So pictures can prompt memories of events. Offer a couple of options when you're asking for a fact, and prompt forgotten steps when it's person's carrying out a procedure. So think, is this person no longer able to dress herself, or would they be able to do so if I prompted or assisted at appropriate points? One last point about memories. Just because someone's memories might not last for long, or how that short-term memory, it's what happens in the moment. It's about meeting people's fundamental needs in here and now and enjoyment in that moment. And while the memory might fade, feelings last much longer. So if a person is feeling happy and content, that feeling will stay even though they may not recall what's made them feel like that. And equally, if it's a negative feeling, that's going to stay with the person too. Next slide, please, Jenny. Sensory changes. Let's have a look at how dementia affects the different senses we have. First, sight. Peripheral vision becomes limited and the person can't see beyond that limited range of view. So when we're looking forward, we see all this round about us. If you cup your hands by the side of your eyes or glasses, if you've got glasses, see how much more limited your sight is then. It must make your world feel so much smaller. And that's also really important if you're thinking about signage in a room. Know how if it's beyond that peripheral view, it's not going to be seen. Depth perception is also affected, such as if you're reaching out to put a cup on a table, you can perceive how much distance there is there. Someone who has that difficulty may miss the table and drop the cup, or trying to judge the depth of a step must be a nightmare. And there's something called molecular vision as well, and that's to do with like trying to process the speed and movement. So if somebody's coming towards you, we can process what that speed is and how they're moving, but that's affected as well. And also pattern recognition, and things like a dot may look like a hole. And a busy carpet, it could look like a million things. It could look like water moving, or it might be if there's dots in it or black spots, it might look like big gaps in the carpet. Hearing. The person's hearing may become hypersensitive to noise, and they could be easily startled. They may have difficulty filtering noise, and they may have difficulty processing long and quickly spoken sentences. Smell. Some can experience olfactory hallucinations. That's smelling things that aren't there, and that can be really frightening. But quite commonly, it's smelling toast or burning rubber. Some things can also smell differently and therefore less appealing, and that could affect appetite. And then we come to taste. There can be a loss of taste buds, so the person may no longer like the taste of something that they used to. And again, it could affect their appetite. So it's worthwhile thinking, do you need to add strong flavours, like sweetening things up or adding more spices? Lastly, touch. Areas such as the palms of the hands, soles of the feet, your mouth, genital region, and skin can become hypersensitive. Think, could that be affecting how a person's responding when you're providing personal care? Other areas such as limbs can become hyposensitive, which can lead to injury as well. Next slide, please, Jenny. We all have fundamental needs that need to be addressed. They're listed, so I'm not going to read them, but I want to highlight that we all need to feel as if we've got some control over our lives, and that can be a challenge if you're living in care. And the other one, occupation, that relates to having a purpose in life. As you hear the other presenters, you're going to notice great examples that demonstrate how these fundamental needs are being met. Next slide, please, Jenna. So how do we take all this information to improve our communication and engagement skills for people with dementia? Firstly, we need to become detectives. You find out about the person, their life stories, you're observing what they're doing and how they're expressing themselves. Think about the sensory changes that the person might be experiencing and how we work with these. Are there any unmet needs? How are you being perceived? Do you look too busy? Or are you approachable? What tone of voice are you using? What's your body language saying? Do you have a friendly demeanour? Do you have good eye contact? Are you using short sentences? Do you give time for the person to process what is being said or asked? Do you use negative terms such as, no, don't do that, calm down, or why did you do that? Or do you use distraction techniques to calm the situation? Are you being respectful? Or do you speak in a patronising manner or the way you would a child? Or they're my wee doll. Could you be the cause of stress and distress? Or can you identify what is for somebody? Lastly, think about the physical factors. So is the person in pain, for instance? Do they have their glasses? Do they have their hearing aids, etc.? The psychological factors, such as the content of what is being said and environment, such as good lighting. What are the noise levels? And is it dementia friendly? I think I was within my time, so I'll hand over.
That's fantastic, Maureen. Thank you so much. We've been cracking the whip in terms of time because we've so much to squash in, so which is lovely. So thank you so much, and that's really laying the basis for the rest of our webinar. And I'm really pulling on that thing about that last thing there about becoming a detective. And I think we'll come back to that again in terms of how do you find out what is the thing, what works for people. It is like being a detective, isn't it? Okay, so I have great pleasure in introducing Leslie. And if you go on to the next slide there, Jenny, and Leslie is from the Erskine care homes, from the care home managers, and she's going to join us now and tell us a story about thinking about somebody in particular and how living the best life. And this is working on the element of touch that Maureen was speaking about there. Hi, Leslie.
Hiya. So thank you for inviting me today. I would like to speak very briefly, because I've only got 5 minutes, about Namaste Care. So Namaste Care was introduced by a social worker in America, Joyce Simmerd, in 2003. And the term means to honour the spirit within. And she developed it to provide a structured way to support residents living with advanced dementia and at the end of their life. And it uses all 5 senses to help what I would class as the silent residents to reach out to the world. So I became interested in it when I was managing a care home and it had 40 residents living in it. And we had a really active activities team. But I could see lots of residents going to activities and getting absolutely nothing out of the activities. And when I done an audit, it turned out to be 37% of the residents living within the home. And so I'd gone researching to see what I could do to support the residents to continue to get meaningful engagement until their very last breath, and came across Namaste Care. It can be carried out in small groups, so that it can happen in a one-to-one, and it's very much about using all your senses, creating a calming, loving environment. And it's led by care staff. It's not an activities staff driven activity either, and it doesn't require extra staff. It's just about redeploying and thinking how you use your staff. So it is. And so we had one resident in particular who was always very, very sociable, and as her dementia was progressing, her family were absolutely adamant that she would continue to go to activities. When she was at the activities, she was becoming very distressed. So she could no longer go on outings, and they were getting really quite upset that she couldn't go on outings, so they were. And it took actually for that lady to go into hospital and become really unwell before the family would accept that she was at a stage where she no longer could get much engagement out of going to a big activity like maybe bingo or going to a concert. And so we sat down and we spoke with the family, and we spoke about the possibility of introducing Namaste Care to her daily life. So we did, and we talked them through what it was, and we made up a information leaflet so that families would be able to refer to it. And they agreed that we could introduce that into our life. And I think I could sit and tell you all sorts of stories about the impact it had on that lady and her family. But the family, after she passed away, sent an email. And whenever I'm doing any training to do with Namaste Care, I always read this email. I think it's probably more powerful than anything I could say to you today. So if you don't mind, I'll just read you this email. And this is from the daughter after the lady passed away. My introduction to Namaste therapy was a month before my mum passed away. I attended the first relatives forum where Linda spoke about this new skill she'd learned. The enthusiasm she showed and the obvious belief she had in the benefits of the therapy were infectious. She was very well aware that some may be sceptical about introducing it within Erskine Park, but you could see she was ready to win her peers over and had such strong convictions regarding the benefit it would bring. Always accepting that dementia is irreversible, I often tried to grab onto any possibility of improvement or plateauing condition, to kid myself on that the end would be far down the road and could be denied. The thought of losing my mum was overwhelming. I was prepared, but nonetheless shocked to find myself having to face up to end-of-life care. Mum had been admitted to hospital, and after 6 days of stress and trauma, A&E, moving to different wards, she finally returned to the care of Erskine Park. Very gently, I was made aware that Mum was not eating or drinking and the final stages had been reached. Sitting with her was stressful, worrying that she may be in pain or wanting to say something but unable to communicate effectively. That all changed when Linda was assigned to give Namaste therapy sessions. The bedroom was transformed. The anxious, tense atmosphere changed to a feeling of calm serenity. Big soft covers were put over harsh lines of the bed and units. The lights were dimmed and soft coloured lights were introduced. Relaxing music playing, there was a lovely scent of essential oils dispersing from a machine. Linda had been given total privacy to carry out massage, and talking in soft tones got positive reactions from Mum. She showed no signs of distress or upset. It appeared that she was so relaxed, she looked like she was floating. I would not have believed the effects if I had not been welcomed into the room and witnessed it myself. I may also say that it gave me a feeling of calmness too. I felt included and informed. In the last few days, Linda was in attendance every day. Mum calmly and quietly faded and passed away peacefully. I had been left with positive thoughts and no regrets. I will never be able to thank Linda for this. She's a skilled carer of the highest professional standard, a role model for others. She offers loving care that goes beyond expectation. If anyone is offered this therapy for their relative, I would strongly recommend it and hope that Linda has every opportunity to take this area of her work forward. She's gifted and should obtain every support. It is quite simply the best thing I've ever put into a care home. We've had lots of evidence to show it's reduced the amount of antipsychotics we use, distress in residents, helped to re-engage residents that had become very silent and locked in, reduction in falls, reduction in UTIs, increase in staff satisfaction helped us, I would say, to retain our staff all during COVID, and the relatives feedback that they have a sense of purpose again, and they no longer are afraid or feel useless when they come to visit their loved ones as their dementia advances. The benefits are just absolutely overwhelming. Thank you.
Leslie, thank you so much. Such a beautiful story, and that I mean, there's nothing like hearing from you know, a resident's family and you know, the deep meaning that the Namaste care and taking that different approach meant to that woman and her family. That's just beautiful. Yeah, and I was so taken at the beginning when you were talking again about being that detective, that you were looking at, well, as we were talking about at the beginning, all the residents, and it's the residents, the quiet resident, the resident who's slightly withdrawn or whatever, and I love the numbers that you were able to put to it as well, saying, well, there's 37% of people are involved in stuff, but what about the other people? So thank you so much for that story, and I'd love to hear more, but we do have to move on. But we will share some information about Namaste care, and we might be able to even put it in the chat as we go along, or we will, you know, as resources come up, we'll share those at the end. So thank you so much for that. That's really appreciated, Leslie. Really brought that to life. So if we could move on to the next one, and you know, Maureen spoke of how somebody might not recognize, you know, how Maureen, you were talking about somebody helping somebody get dressed, and they might not be able to do the whole thing, but with prompts or whatever. And this woman, and unfortunately I don't know her name, which is terrible, in Grange Park Care Home, nobody knew she could play the piano. Her family had forgotten. It had been 15 years since anybody had thought about it. But somebody donated this keyboard to the care home, and she was walking past one day, and usually wouldn't bother with it, you know, but she sat down and she started playing the piano. So let's have a look at that, if you wouldn't mind, Jenny. Oh, that just makes me shiver every time I see it. And she started playing the piano again, and again it was that memory that's in her muscles, being able to just, her fingers knew where to go, even if she what you know, didn't know herself. So it's just a lovely indication of how a little prompt can really result in somebody, again, and Maureen had spoken about feeling of self-esteem in occupation. You can just imagine how she feels after being reminded that actually she can play the piano, even if she cannot do other things. If we go on to the next slide there, this one is also about, I'm sure you'll have heard of Playlist for Life. And this is about, let's have a listen to a story where it's very, very personal. It's personal to Harry, and you can pick that up as you're going, because it's that detective work, finding out what worked for Harry and what made a difference for Harry, and we can see the difference here, and we'll look at a bit of this one. Thanks, Jenny.
I am so enthusiastic about it. I think it's fabulous.
Being able to see people connecting again, being able to see the person with dementia obviously focusing on their family member again.
Just to see him become the person he is that you can see today, it's just amazing. And
this is a remarkable change in the man that I first met around 6 months ago.
Harry came into us, he was quite a withdrawn, retracted gentleman, very pleasant, very nice, but he lacked the ability to be able to interact with anybody.
He wasn't eating, wasn't drinking, couldn't get a spoon in his mouth. We wouldn't have gave tuppence for him at that time. Margaret got really upset, used to leave crying all the time, which upset us. It used to get us upset going into him. What else could we do? We tried everything.
Gradually, as we began to introduce Harry's playlist to him, he began to tap his hands and tap his feet, and obviously was engaging with the music. And then he began to use words again. And this surprised not just me, but his wife. And gradually what we've seen over the last few months of introducing Harry's playlist to him is he's changed dramatically.
On my mind, and now that we've come to the end of our rainbows. To me, it has made a big difference. He was regressed. He was right back, and I just thought he was gone, absolutely gone from me. But not now. He's back, and he's loud, and he wants to talk, and he wants to take part.
It's just amazing. It is amazing because he was very unresponsive for a long time when we first had him here, and we tried a lot of different things to bring him into the conversation, and it was still non-reactive. And just lately, because of the music, certainly because of the music, he has become the person he was before.
This is what Harry and I used to dance to when we met. We used to dance to this one when we met, didn't we? At the Singles Club.
Oh, aye.
You used to sing this, didn't you?
I sing it. I sing it.
And that's when I fell for you, wasn't it?
That's
It's been wonderful to watch the transformation from Harry, from being somebody with a really severe dementia. He still has a severe dementia, but the fact that he can now interact with his wife when the music is on, he sings along very unprompted, doesn't really need a lot of encouragement to do it, and he's got a smile that would break hearts. It's absolutely amazing.
Tell me this, can you be...
Thanks, thanks, Jenny. And another beautiful story of Maureen had spoken about those cues that connect us with things, and we've seen the tactile cues, sitting down at the piano and suddenly being able to do that. We've heard a personal playlist and bringing Harry right back to the music that he used to dance to back in the days of the Singles Club. So, Anuj, can I ask you to come in and tell us a little bit more about two other short stories about different cues and people responding to them? Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Louise. Yeah, so just a couple of little stories. So the first story is about Leonard and his dram. So Leonard arrived for a respite in the care home I used to manage. He needed the placement immediately as his wife had been struggling to cope with his advancing vascular dementia. His communication had become significantly compromised in recent times with limited one-word responses, and he rarely ever initiated a conversation with us himself. We were advised that Leonard did not communicate or socialize with any friends or neighbors anymore in the local community. But he only lived a few miles away from the care home, and we were lucky enough to have some lovely staff with local knowledge who had met and known Leonard as a pub owner before he came to work with us and before his dementia had progressed enough that he could no longer do his role. Leonard would typically share a dram and a chat with the clients when he ran the pub, so we decided to give this a try. We offered Leonard to share a dram and a chat with another resident one afternoon, and the difference in him was remarkable. The taste and the smell of the dram took Leonard back to his old days and ways, and he was chatting and communicating in clear, long sentences and enjoying a brilliant walk around the garden with me afterwards. And he was able to share so much detail of his past life and his preferences with me. He was a completely different person, and it was an absolute pleasure to have met the real Leonard, full of life. And all it took was a wee dram and a desire to help him live his best life. And I've got another wee story about Lorna and our ice cream van. So we used to do the ice cream trolley regularly in the care home during the warmer months. And one of our creative activity coordinators said about making this experience feel a lot more authentic. So she drew kind of like a ice cream man and painted it on some cardboard. Her husband reinforced that with some wooden sticks and clips so it could clip onto our trolley. And then she would play the music through the tablet and a Bluetooth speaker as she went around with the ice cream trolley. So it was a lot more authentic ice cream man experience. And now we had a lady called Lorna with fairly advanced stages of dementia who communicated very little now and she'd taken to mostly dozing in the lounge or in her room for most of the day. Lorna again only spoke to staff in very few words and only during essential personal care and took very limited part in social engagement activities. However, the first time the newly revamped ice cream van came through the lounge where Lorna was dozing, she was immediately awake, chatting to staff. She took her time choosing what she would have from the van and had a conversation with the duty manager on shift, actually talking to her about Lorna's younger days when the duty manager's mum used to come to drive the ice cream van and come to the house where Lorna used to live and how she loved to have a chat with her mum and get some ice cream at the same time. Now, that was a significant transformation, huge transformation in alertness levels and the long-term memory that Lorna was able to access about the manager's mum, and a massive change in her presentation and communication. Just so lovely to see because of just that audible trigger that took her back to Lorna of old. That's my two short stories.
That's lovely, absolutely lovely. It's really bringing to life these last stories about these cues and these triggers. So I'm going to move over and Shannon hopefully is here. Shannon, if you're here, you're able to, I think you were a minute ago, you're able to unmute your microphone and your video. And if not, it's okay. We'll come back to Shannon in a minute because I know people sometimes get lost somewhere and then have to come back. Oh, do you know, I think we're late, aren't we? Are we late? Oh, Shannon had to be gone by 11. Oh no. Oh, that's terrible. We'll have to get Shannon back another time. That's our fault. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We've been telling some stories about things that worked for various people, and we'll have to get Shannon back another time to tell us her story. But can we move on to the next slide? And we'd like to hear, because you have and the next slide again, you have a depth of experience, and we'd love to hear from your point of view a wee story that worked. Now, if you haven't used this already, take your smartphone, open the camera, point it at the QR code and click on the text that comes up. And this will bring us to this page. Or you can type in www.aha-slides and so on. So tell us a short story of something that worked for you. And this could be something, the smallest, tiniest thing, or it could be a big thing. And you can write a sentence or two, you can put in a word. It's up to you because you have a little bit of space in this one to tell us a bit more. It's been great. And we know that you'll have been supporting somebody and something unusual just sparked something for the person or really helped, or somebody who was in a stressed state, really helped with something. So we'd love to hear what they're at. So Anna, you can pick out a few of those.
Absolutely. Yeah, some interesting things like using photographs to reminisce, playing music in the lounge and having a sing-song or we dance with the residents. It's amazing how much difference simple dance and music makes to people's lives and people's abilities and takes them back to the people they used to be. Visits to favorite landmarks, helping to continue tasks like baking, smiles and a gentle massage to create a relaxing environment. So a lot of things, I suppose, in line with Namaste Care, smell pot spices, triggering memories through that taste of smell. Animals, therapy pony visits, getting outside for walks. Kappa, SB Duet resource. Connect with someone I had been trying for a long time with. That sounds very interesting. Intergenerational projects, yeah, what a difference it can make to have some appropriate intergenerational engagement to help us remember who we used to be and the connections we love. Reading with residents with amazing outcomes. sitting and holding and gently stroking their hand and helping them to open up. And they started to sing a lullaby. Yeah, some really lovely, powerful, emotional things to read here. Reaching out with a public appeal to being a resident celebrity idol to visit him. Oh, that's so cool. It completely changed the gentleman's attitudes towards living in a care home and engaging in activities. How brilliant. Bus trips around a village, doll therapy, music and singing. Amazing. Karaoke, sharing photos, dancing, flowers for smell, more animal stories, massages. Yeah. So lots of really interesting things that do work. It's good that a lot of it goes with what we are sharing as well.
Absolutely lovely. And if you're worried that you've missed some of this, because obviously there's so much here, we'll gather them together, and as part and parcel of sending you the recording and the slides and so on, we'll send you these ideas, because there may well be ideas here that you think would be really helpful to try. And I just want to pick one other thing that's in the chat as well, using local dialect in communication. And that is so powerful. And I don't know whether people who are calling in from the Highlands, the Western Isles, or whatever, it may well, people who have Gaelic as their one of their languages and so on, whether you're connecting in with that and noticing that as part and parcel of what you're doing. Okay, well, this is all about, there's so much here about listening and really hearing and being that detective. And I'd like to pass on now to Nicola McCardle. So on to the next slide, please, Jenny, who's going to give us a brief introduction to a new way of listening that we thought you'd be interested in. So over to you, Nicola.
Good afternoon. Are we afternoon yet? No, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me along. Next slide, please, Jenny. Just before I start my own talk, I'd like to say thanks to everybody who's spoken before. I always know it's a good webinar when I feel quite emotional. And actually, during some of that, what I found was I looked up a picture of my own gran. I'll give you a wee flash over there. She is a lady who died as I was having my own daughter of Alzheimer's disease, and lived in a care home at the end of her life, supported by us as a family. And actually, all that I'm hearing today ties in with that and reminds us why we're here and doing what we're doing. And I think it's an amazing job that you're all doing. And I just wanted to say thanks for everything already. So now that I'm getting started myself, I want to go back to some of the things that Maureen said. So a few people have touched on pain already in relation to dementia. And one of the fundamental needs that Maureen spoke to us about is that physical comfort and relief from pain. You know yourself, if you're sore, you can't concentrate or think about anything else until that's dealt with. But how scary or frustrating would that be if there's nothing you can do about it and nobody knows? So what I want you to start thinking around is, could there be an unmet need around pain? When Maureen spoke to us about those sensory changes, could that be making a difference for someone and putting them in more pain than you realise? And could it be an underlying reason for stress and distress that you're seeing in people? And when Leslie was speaking and telling us her story as well about the Namaste care, at end of life care, one of the things you touched on was the family were concerned that their relative would be in pain. It's a natural, inherent need. If anybody's a parent here, you'll know that if your child is sore, you need to know that you've done everything you can to help that. We all want to make sure that nobody in our care is in pain. So with that said, I'll give you a wee bit of information just about myself. I'm a physio, so some people might say that I'm more used to causing pain than helping it. But in this instance, it's the opposite. I've always had a special interest in falls in older people and safer mobility. And I work in the Care Inspectorate now, looking at care homes and older people's services around the areas of safer mobility, frailty, rehab. And also I recently completed a Scottish Quality and Safety Fellowship, and as part of that, what I had to do was a project, and I was lucky enough to get involved in this pain check project. So why is it needed? In care homes, up to 80% of people with dementia will regularly experience pain. And as somebody's dementia progresses, the more severe the dementia, the higher the level of pain, and the more frequent that pain will come on as their ability to tell you they're in pain is taken away. So because of that, and this isn't a reflection in the care, and it's not a reflection in care homes because it's the same in every setting, including acute wards, pain is often under-recognised and under-treated in people who have a cognitive impairment. Now, that can be quite hard to hear because everybody's out to do their best job. And me as a physiotherapist, and even looking back to my own grand's care, I don't think I gave enough recognition that she could be in pain, because what we often think is that ways that pain can present are due to dementia. So it's actually flipping that in its head and making sure that things aren't assumed that people are behaving in a certain way because of dementia, and that actually there could be underlying causes behind that. Next slide, please, Jenny. So what is Pain Check? Pain Check's an app that uses artificial intelligence technology and smart automation to assess pain in people who can't verbalise pain. So if your residents can't tell you they're sore, or if you ask, my gran was a lady that even if her leg was hanging off, is it sore? It's not too bad. A lot of people in our care homes are still old school and don't like to complain or make a fuss, and so often will tell you, even if they can tell you, they'll say they're in less pain than they are. And so this, you can take either a photo or a short video of your resident, and it looks at the micro movements within their face. And then you answer questions after that on how over the last 7 days their behaviour's been, what activities they've been able to do, have they been shouting out, they look at their voice, they look at how their movement is, are they guarding parts of their body, and all of that then adds up to give you a pain score and tells you if that person's in no pain, mild, moderate or severe. Next slide, please, Jenny. So there is a video on Pain Check, but I'm aware that the webinar is running over time slightly, so that'll be in the slide deck, so when it comes out to you, that's there to let you see it. But I'm going to just go on to the next slide, please, Jenny, and pull back some time. So we've tried it. This is the results from just that first care home where we piloted it. So before Pain Check was introduced, the seniors within the care home could do pain assessments, so there were 9 of them. But actually, because Pain Check takes a lot of the subjectivity out and the clinical reasoning, so you're not asking care staff to make a decision on whether somebody's to get medication or not. They're just going through the process, and the app determines that you feed into your seniors. It went up to 27 people within that care home. So all staff within the care home could use it. Up until Pain Check was introduced, people were using the Abbey pain scale, which I think is fairly common, but actually they were going through the Abbey pain scale process in their head, but not having it documented. Whereas Pain Check stores all of these assessments. So everything that you do, all pain assessments are then recorded for you. You're not having to do additional paperwork. So it went from no documented pain assessments to 831 within that first 6 months, just within this one care home. Now, you can see from these charts, can you see how the pain assessments start and then it dips before it goes back up again? Real life intervened, and within that space, there was a COVID outbreak. It was quite a severe COVID outbreak within the home. A lot of staff and a lot of residents were impacted by it. But as soon as things started to settle and they came out of that outbreak, you can then see that it improved again. So overall, even with that, there were 831 done. Residents had at least one pain assessment a month. Because you will have some residents who aren't in pain and actually are fine, but everybody was checked at least once a month. Next slide, please, Jenny. So it did lead to changes in medication. There was actually a reduced need for medication. So analgesia came down. The use of laxatives came down too. There weren't a lot of people within this service who had psychoactive medication, so it didn't make much difference to that, but that's something we're looking at in the homes as we move forward. Next slide, please. But to me, this is the bit that matters. So what? So you're doing these pain assessments. There's been some changes to medications, but what difference is it actually making? So these are my favourite measures, quality of life. So falls, see before the COVID outbreak, falls reduced by 75%, with nothing different being done in the care home other than the way to do pain assessments. However, after that COVID outbreak and people having to be cared for within their rooms and things, in the whole 6 months, they were down overall 42%. Stress and distress, which is a big use of carers' time dealing with stress and distress and managing that within the care home, not to mention how traumatic it is for the person experiencing it. There was an initial reduction of 42%, but unfortunately that spiked during the COVID outbreak, and so overall there was no change, but we'll keep looking at that going forward. But the other 2 things I thought was really interesting too was half of the residents at the end with progressive dementia diagnosis, actually their weight was up. Now, you know how difficult it can be just to maintain somebody's weight, never mind get it up at the end. So that's something we're looking at. Now, that could be because people are more settled and able to sit at a table and eat, or it could be that pain was stopping their appetite before. We don't know, but we're just glad to see it. And then dependency, last thing there, half of the residents had a reduced dependency score at the end of it, so had that bit more independence. So that's the difference that getting that right can make. So what I would urge you, if anybody would like any more information, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But other than that, I want you to have a think behind some of your residents' behaviours. Could pain be driving that? Regardless of the way you assess it, take it into consideration, because none of us are doing it enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicola. My goodness, it's so extraordinary, isn't it, about how, you know, focusing in on something like pain, and we've got such interesting details there about the impact on people, which I wasn't totally aware about. So thank you so much. And again, that whole thing, which is a theme today, which is about listening to folk in many different ways. Okay, we're going to move on with back to Maureen. And Maureen, this is around how do we know if we're getting it right? So over to yourself.
Yeah, thanks. So we're going to look at how we know we're getting it right and how you communicate that as well. And there's many examples of chats we could use, and we're going to look at Helen Sanderson's. Firstly, we're going to watch this small video that shows us it in action, and then we'll have a quick discussion about how we would use that with somebody with dementia. Can you play, please, Jenny?
People can tell you things in lots of different ways, not just by talking. Here we meet Rachel and hear about how she communicates. This is written down in the communication chart.
Right, Rachel, we said that we'd look at your communication chart today, didn't we? But Kelly's come to support you today, and we had a meeting last night to look at your communication with Sally and with Angela, because they know you really, really well. So one example we talked about, Rachel, was when you go shopping, because I know that you like shopping, don't you? Hey? Angela takes you shopping quite a lot in your van, doesn't she? And what we've said is that when we know that you like something that you really, really want to buy, what you'll do is you'll thrash your arms and legs around, and you'll try and grab something. So when you do that, we know that we have to bring that item to you. And what we might do is we might give you another choice of another item. So just to make sure that that's the item that you want, we give you a choice. And I've been told that what you do is when you really, really want something, what you do is you grab it. You grab it and pull at it, don't you? So that means you want it. So in the circumstances, if you've got the money to buy it, then what we do is we go and buy that for you. If you've got the money, don't we? And we know your favourite colour's pink. You've got loads of pink things, haven't you? And I know that you're really, really trendy because I've seen some of your clothes at your house. So that's one example, isn't it? That's when we know what to do to give you a choice about what you want to do.
The communication chart is a really good person-centred approach which helps us to learn how Rachel's communicating with us. And as we listen really well to Rachel and to what she's telling us, we record what we're learning, so that from having one communication chart with perhaps 5 examples on, we build up to a book of examples of how, through listening really well to Rachel, we've developed a number of communication charts. Helps us to really explore different people's perceptions about how Rachel communicates with us, and it can explain very clearly how Rachel's communicating with us. It means that Rachel's got really good support because consistently staff know how Rachel is letting us know what are the things that are really important to her in her life and what really good support looks like.
Rachel, do we ask you things? We ask you things like, would you like to go on the floor? Yeah? And I think what Sally said to me yesterday is, there's often times at college when you're painting with your hands.
Oh yes.
Remember that, you're painting with your hands, aren't you? Eh? And what happens is, when they go to wash the paint off your hands, you don't like it.
We're not allowed, no, Rach, we're not allowed to wash your hands, because I think at home she wants to show them that.
Right, what
she's
you've been
actually doing some work at home.
Yeah, so we know
we're not allowed to, because
you really give us good signs is when you're happy and when you're very, very sad.
Thanks, Jenny. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So how would we use this? I'm going to introduce Betty to you and just slot Betty into the different sections. And it's a simple example I'm giving you. But firstly, can I just say about that video? There's some key words that come through that, and it's about like that consistency of good care, know how finding what the good care is and then making sure that it's going to be consistent. And what about that smile when she said about getting that choice and being able to buy the thing that she really wanted? I'm like, whoa. So, okay, how do we do it? So Betty, what's happening at the time? Betty's sitting in the chair, she has dementia, and she appears lost in her own thoughts. The activity coordinator is brilliant. She's going to be starting a group for art, and she's rushing about getting people to join in, and she sees Betty, and she goes up and she asks Betty if she wants to join in. What happens? Betty quickly becomes irritated. No, get away, no. What do we think at that time? Okay, she doesn't want to take part in this activity, and actually maybe it's just as well she doesn't. She could upset other people. What we need to do is think about how we enter Betty's peripheral view. Think about all these senses that we spoke about and how they can be affected, and see if by taking a different approach and doing things slightly differently, slowing down what we're doing, approaching in a better manner, if that could make a difference, and perhaps we might have a better outcome. Now, I know that's just a really simple example and it doesn't always work out that way, but that's where when we're talking about becoming a detective, it's about taking a wee step back, reflecting on the situation and not drawing conclusions, because sometimes our first conclusions aren't absolutely the right ones, and we need to reflect on it and see if we can try again rather than just saying, right, she doesn't want to take part. Thanks, Louise.
Abby, thank you so much. So moving on to the next one, and I'm wondering about communication charts and wondering, could they be useful where you work? And it could be no, maybe, yes, or actually you already use something like this. And those communication charts are part of being a detective, you know, figuring out, because it's when you stop and pause and consider what the experience is like for the person that you think might really help. So that's interesting what folk are doing. And again, there's, I'm not a broken record here, but there's the QR code on the left if you haven't yet managed to get in, or there's a web address as well. Okay, so we're just interested to see whether that might be useful. And one of the things that the communication charts helps us with, so there's a little over half saying yes, a third saying maybe, and there's a small amount of people saying, well, actually, we already use something like this, and some people say, no, that wouldn't work where we're going. All right, so we move on to the next slide, because this is very much food for thought, because those communication charts are very much about helping you track improvement. It's helping us stop and have a think about things, because that example you gave, Maureen, there about saying, well, no, she doesn't like art or whatever. It's actually thinking, when this happens, we think this means, but let's try and find out. So what you're trying to do is, oh no, that doesn't work. It might mean something else. Oh, no, that didn't whatever. So here are some questions about, the big thing is, whatever you're doing, is it actually making an improvement? And all of the stories we've heard so far, there's been an improvement for somebody. Somebody's life has improved. This, you know, greater joy, greater just a better quality of life for the people involved. So do think about how, you already track improvements in lots of ways, whether it's ABC charts or numbers or medication, whatever, but that is all about, and what does that tell us? What can we do differently? How can we check it out? And a big one, making sure that everybody knows what's working or indeed not working. Because if you figure out that actually, charging up to Betty and being all in a fluster and busy doesn't work for her, but nobody else knows that, that's not going to be very helpful. And of course, capturing that the person's life is improving, and where does this information sit? Is it in the person's personal plan? And where's the evidence that it's actually working? Because it's so positive for you when you think, yes, this is making a difference, because this is the thing that we really want. Okie doke. Right, we're moving on now to another story. And we have Katie Jenks and Sheila from the HC1 dementia team. So can I welcome you guys on board? Maybe you'd like to turn on your I can't remember the word, cameras and so on. So listen, I know you're going to tell us a story about George, and I'd love to just ask a couple of questions. So George was telling you guys without words that things weren't quite right. Do you want to explain what was happening at the time?
Yeah, well, George was very angry. He was frustrated. There was some physical behaviour. He would lash out his staff. He would throw things. It was clear that he didn't understand where he was, and he was frightening to others. Reassurance was quite difficult because he didn't trust us. It was clear that he didn't trust us, so it was very difficult to deal with those behaviours.
Absolutely. So that sounds really difficult for George and really difficult for the staff. So how did you listen to George in a different way? Because obviously things weren't going well. So what did you do that was different?
Well, the first step we had to do was make sure everybody was safe. So we put one-to-one in place that was basically put in place, first of all, for the safety of others. But everybody knew that just wasn't enough. We didn't want to just keep others safe. We wanted to enhance George's life. We knew that this was the dementia. That was very clear with George. In between the behaviours that weren't desirable, you could see the real George, and we needed to get to George rather than the other way about. We knew this was our problem rather than, George's problem. This was our problem. The staff found it difficult because they felt they weren't good enough when we weren't getting to him. So we observed him and we watched his behaviours. We looked for triggers to the negative behaviours. But again, that wasn't enough. We wanted to look at triggers for what created positive behaviours in him.
Oh, lovely. Oh, I love that. I love that switch to thinking, what do we notice when things go right? Okay. So what changes did you make, to...
Well, we were supported by the dementia team that Katie leads the Scotland side of it, and we enhanced our observations. We had ABC charts in place, and we just observed everything, but we did have a big focus on what worked for George as much as identifying the triggers. I think that in lots of places we're very good at identifying the triggers for the negatives, but not for the positives. So we put as much work into identifying the positives. We took the model and used the same type of model, but it was for, with good notes. And we listened to him. He all along, as we got to know him, we realised all along he was screaming at us what he needed, and we just couldn't understand him.
Fabulous. Okay, I love that. I absolutely love that. And things must have gone wrong as well as gone right. So I'm interested, how did you keep going? Because that sounds, it sounds like it's very dedicated, and you've got, what kept you going in the middle of all of this, Sheila?
I thought about that quite a bit when you asked that question, and I think it was compassion that kept us going. We saw, for day one, George would show his true side. He showed his true side. He showed us the man he was, and we wanted to get to him. And when things went wrong, we got better at identifying a new trigger, and it was very complex because the things that created, you know, like the thing that he liked doing, there might be a trigger in that created the behaviours we didn't want to see. So we had to look at everything very, the minute details. So we were taking him out into the garden, but somewhere along the line, somebody made the mistake of telling him what to do, and he doesn't like that. So rather than saying it was the gardening that was the trigger, it was the exact thing the person had said to him at the time. So it was getting into every single detail and sitting down. And, you know, like the staff had, throughout it was clear to see who George was. He motivated us, the family motivated us, and we motivated each other.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And how, the minute detail, but noticing that, because of course, none of us want to think that we're the one who's causing it, you know, and if I'm the staff member who's telling George what to do, I would find that quite difficult to say, oh, well, you know, I caused that reaction, and I'd have to really be ready to learn about my, you know, what I do and say as well. So that, whoa, that sounds quite tricky.
There was no blame. There was only learning. There was no blame. There was only learning.
Love that. Love that. So we started off with George being really angry, and you know, you gave a great description of, oh my goodness, he was not happy. He didn't like the whole thing and what was happening, where he was, and so on. So you noticed the things that were going positive. You tried to find out more ways to make those positive things happen. So where did you end up in the end? Like what was the...
Well, we basically, and this is one of Katie's kind of sayings, we found the why to his negative behaviour and his positive behaviour, and we created a care plan that was therapeutic to him, and we communicated it quite well. It was detailed to the triggers, detailed to what to do about the triggers, and it detailed his best day, what he likes to do. And again, when we got it right, it was written all over his face.
And could I just ask, what was George's favourite day? Like what type of thing did he like to do? Like what was it?
He needed a purpose. He needed a job. He needed to feel, you know, like part of the community, and he needed to, at first he felt abandoned by everyone, and he needed to belong. And so basically he's got a job now, and he wears a uniform, and he carries out his jobs and he helps us. And I think the best day that put a smile on my face was when there was a delivery, and one of the carers was taking him out for a cigarette, and the delivery guy shouted, "Are you not going to give me a hand?" And as quick as a flash, the carer shouted back, "We're on our tea break," and carried on walking. He didn't realise that George was a resident of the home, you know, like, so it was just so normal for George to be part of it.
Fantastic. And that goes back to what Maureen was saying. We all need an occupation, self-esteem, you know, something that, you know, we feel valued in the world. And then it sounds like you've got a very detailed plan. How did you make sure that all the other staff and the family and everybody, you know, stick with it or learn from it or keep learning?
Well, it was communication. Everybody was trained in dementia. The dementia team helped us get the staff trained up, and it was individual training that they got regarding George, not how to deal with stress and distress, how to deal with George's stress and distress. So it was very person-centred, the training. I feel that if you want to provide person-centred care, you've got to start with person-centred training. And so we communicated it. Everybody had to read the care plan. No one was allowed to take care of him unless they had specific training in place, and that was the dementia training, the stress and distress training, and the training specific to George. And we kept very specific notes regarding George and communicated it well. And Leslie, who doesn't like speaking, Leslie just kept in touch and had many a meeting with the staff regarding George.
So it wasn't that you got to some stage and then that was it. And hi, Leslie, lovely to see you there, even if you're not going to speak with us today. I know that you did a great job.
I speak too much. She doesn't pick enough.
But that, it keeps on going. It's not a kind of a one and done. It's keep going and keep that. It sounds like, do you know what it sounds like? You guys are so curious and positive about George, and I'm sure everybody else you care for, in terms of being really positive about them as a person and curious about who they are. And as Katie was saying, like, what's the why? Why? What's happening? What's the thing? And I guess that's what each of us would want, you know, as we get older. We would like people to be interested in the why and what works for people. So Katie, maybe I'll come to you, because lovely to hear. What advice would you give to, because there's other people on the call who maybe are in the same boat. What advice would you give to them, do you think?
So you've said it. So as Sheila says, my big question when I work with any home is, what is the why? Every behaviour is telling us something. It's not just to be difficult. The person with dementia is trying to tell us something, and it's our job to find that why. And until we know it, we keep asking that question. And that's how I work with homes. It's constantly looking at, what are they doing? What are the behaviours? Let's look at the wee things as well. Do you know, when we're looking at the charts, we also look at a positive day and a good day and learn from both of them, because quite often you can see more in a good day, what's actually giving them meaning, rather than just focusing on the negative all the time. And that's how we've tried to change the culture within HC1, looking at dementia care. It's that real positive behaviour solutions. And because when you look at that, you start to see the person. You don't see the task, you don't see the behaviour. You see George, you see that George is struggling, you see that George is bored, you see that George is fed up, and you respond to that rather than responding to George is hit us, George is shouting. And it's that shift. And what we've really seen in Barleystone for the rest of the community is the staff have then adopted that approach for all of their residents, and they continue to learn. They're not now scared to say, we might have got it wrong. They then look at it and say, well, how did we get it wrong? What can we change? Because we've taken that blame culture away as well. It's about, we are not always going to get it right, but we need to learn from it. And as long as we're learning and adapting, involving everybody, and we get to that final nugget of the why, so that then we're not having to use medication, we're not having to use restraint or restrictive practice. And we very much get a focus on, if we need to use medication to find the why, it's the shortest time. We look at that 6-week period and then start to reduce it off as well.
Fantastic. Well, listen, can I thank the three of you very much for coming to tell us the story. And I know so many people on the call are going to have much that they'll pick up from it and lots to think about. And I love the continuous learning, but I also love the fact that you're all recognizing that you're human and the people you're supporting are human. We're all human in this, and we're all trying our best. And when we learn and develop and grow and improve, we feel so good about our work as well. So that's fantastic. So thank you so much. Woo, now gosh, there's so much here that I'm going to be thinking about for ages afterwards. But I'm now going to move on to our next wee thing. And we thought it'd be really interesting for you guys to hear from one of our colleagues. So this is the next slide. This is Barbara. Barbara is one of our inspector colleagues, and it's always interesting to hear, well, what happens on inspection when somebody's out and about and what they're looking for. So Barbara, over to you to tell us a wee thing.
Well, I always, you pick up a feeling often when you walk into a care home or a service, and the feeling that I've been left at the end of this webinar is excitement. Also just that sense of people's needs being met right where they're at. So I've taken a different approach. I thought I was going to do something differently yesterday, but as I've been going through and listening to all the contributions, I thought, well, how would I, as an inspector, what we call triangulate the evidence? So what would I be looking for? So I've heard, so say all of this was sitting with the manager or the staff, and you were telling me all this amazing things that were happening in your service. So I've looked at it, all of this is happening in the one home. So what would I do? So first of all, looking at what Leslie was saying at the beginning about the audit that she did for the meaningful engagement for people with advanced dementia, and looking at that Namaste care being introduced. I would look at maybe some of the people that she had selected that they were maybe using as part of the pilot, and then looking at the personal plan to see that how that was being reflected. Also talking to the staff, asking them about it. So if it was for George, speaking to, the staff when you're walking around the home. So, tell me a bit about George. What are some of the strategies that you're using? Looking that back at the personal plan as well. And very much using the quality frameworks. So I've got the one for care homes for adults and older people. Obviously, there's other ones for other types of services. But I was thinking about quality indicator 1.2. People get the most out of life. And when we're out and about during an inspection, we're very much using the quality frameworks, and that's where we base our knowledge, we base our understanding. The health and social care standards are embedded throughout all of these quality frameworks. And as I was listening to you all, I was looking through, and from 1.2, one of the indicator, it just popped right out. It said people benefit from regular interactions and engagement from staff and experience support that promotes independence, dignity, privacy, and choice. This includes encouragement and resources to take part in meaningful occupations that validate a person's identity. It also involves providing opportunities for people to feel included and attached to others, thus promoting their sense of well-being. So that's out the kind of the very good column. So what I would be doing is using a statement like that and walking around the home. I would maybe be doing my SOFI, you've heard of that, the short observational framework for inspection. So I might be sitting in a corridor, I might be sitting in a room where people are, using the SOFI framework to observe a period of time, looking for positive interactions. I would be looking at people who are maybe not involved in the big group activities, thinking about people who are in their rooms. So how do people with advanced dementia who are maybe unable to get up from bed for long periods of time, so how are we involving them to really have them, get the most out of life right up to the end of their life? What I also really liked about the communication charts, which Maureen was bringing in, was about that consistent approach for people. So is a personal plan, is it able to provide consistent care so all the staff are able to pick up? It doesn't just say, George likes to have a shower in the morning, but, does the water need to heat up first, or does someone like that just cold burst on their skin if they've got that sensitivity? So how can we reduce triggers and reduce things that are going to be preventing stress and distress episodes? I would also be looking at self-evaluation. So is the service using self-evaluation? Is there an improvement plan? So had Leslie incorporated that audit and the plan to roll out the Namaste care in the improvement plan? How had she involved the families, and she was getting that really good feedback from people? Also speaking to staff and just chatting. And one of the things as well, so if we're thinking about that people benefit from regular interactions for staff. So I'm thinking as I'm walking around a corridor in a care home, do staff disappear when you walk along? There can always be that kind of fear of the intimidation, but just really try and encourage staff to, talk to us, speak to us, tell them about the good bits of practice that are happening. But also maybe in an evening when staff are sitting together, maybe round a dining table. And this can be something that, can be, I find maybe a wee bit upsetting at times, big groups of staff sitting, maybe updating notes. Why could they not be sitting in a room doing their notes beside somebody that maybe doesn't have a lot of contact or a lot of visitors? Get staff to reflect on their training. So from what the colleagues for Katie and Sheila were saying, so show us the reflective accounts following the training, show us the slides from the person-centered training, and then how that all links back to the supervisions and the appraisals. and the medications, the pain charts. So am I seeing that reflected in the evaluation of somebody's personal plan, that they had a reduced amount of pain medication because we had done the assessments? And the other thing that I think is key, all of this can be absolutely wonderful, but we want to really see that reflected in the daily notes. So not just up, had breakfast, had a wash, spent time in the lounge with fellow residents. That's enough. You know, that kind of thing can be soul destroying. I know it's quick and it's easy just to put in, but let's talk about putting an entry in for the girl with the pink. No, so she went out shopping today and she selected a pink jumper, or she was up, she was going out to her activity today. So we held up the pink jumper and the purple jumper, but she picked the pink one and she put that on. So one small outcome focused. It doesn't have to be War and Peace, but just something to show that staff know what the personal plan is and that staff know how they're supporting George, you know, to come out and help move the boxes. You know, let's see that in the daily notes. Or, you know, loads of different things, but self-evaluation, your improvement plan. So just triangulating all that wonderful information. And that's the type of things, you know, come and show us when your inspector comes into the service. Come and tell us, come and show us. Own the inspection, it's your inspection. Come and show us all the wonderful things that you're doing to support people's needs. So I hope that is, and also phone up your inspector, ask them questions out with that. I know we don't do a lot of the contact calls, but yes, we are human too. I know that sometimes doesn't seem it, but give us a phone, you know, phone up people, ask them questions, send them an email, and get them involved in supporting your service. So thank
Lovely.
you.
Thanks, Barbara. And it's all about, again, that humanity. It's all about, you know, what's it like to live in this service? What's it like to receive the service? And you're looking to see the evidence that that is happening, and you're seeking out the good. As you know, you really want to hear the good things that are happening as well, and then find out that impact. So really helpful. So folks, we're going to go on to the next one, and I'm going to ask, I wasn't sure whether to fit this in, but actually I was reading some stuff by Wendy Mitchell, and if she doesn't, if you don't know her name, look her up. She's written she's a person who had young, early onset dementia, and yet I heard, she was on the radio the other day, and she was talking about how, you know, the dementia is closing in on her, and how actually by being outdoors and in nature, somehow it dilutes the dementia for her. So Anij, could you just tell us that wee story about Nessie?
Of course. I call it Nessie and the walking prescription. So Nessie was the lady with advanced dementia who had to be admitted to the care home from the local community, as she'd really begun to lose orientation to time and place and would often be found in her night clothes in the high street at early hours of the morning. Presentation you probably heard a lot before people get admitted to your care home. At admission on a good day, Nessie had really decent insight into her dementia diagnosis and was able to clearly express that she would like to live in the care home since it was local and would reduce some worries for her and her family, and staying within the community itself meant a lot to her. She had fantastic family support, even though most of her family lived over an hour's drive away, and they visited a few times each week and spent lots of quality time with her in the home and the local outdoors. However, COVID came soon after and we went into lockdown. A few months into lockdown, we had a significant increase in stress and distress behavior with Nessie. She would often be banging at the door, asking to be let out so she could go look after her little children, or she could go make her husband's tea. Her sleep quality had also markedly reduced. GP and the CPN felt her dementia had progressed significantly. Her quetiapine doses were increased. She was also prescribed lorazepam in increasing doses for severe distress. And we were often having to provide her this lorazepam for distress. But then her key worker started thinking and took the time to think about all of her situation more deeply and felt that there is one of the key changes lockdown had brought, and that was a significantly curtailed contact with family, the outdoors, and the community. Nessie enjoyed her time whenever she was outdoors, but staff often worried that when distressed, they might not be able to get Nessie to return to the care home. So we did some risk assessments. We put a short-term change to her care plan in place, where the key worker pretty much prescribed a minimum of 2 walks a day if Nessie was in agreement to go for a walk. And this small change led to a significant reduction in her stress, since her need to be out there was being met. her need to connect with folk was being met. There was never a situation when Nessie declined to return to their home. And she had a lot more good days, and we could actually see the Nessie of old. When she was out, she could actually talk about, this is where my home was, this is where this, shop used to be, and things like that. So she could really tap into that memory simply because her need had been met, and she could be social in the community, and be the person Nessie always used to be.
Lovely. I love that prescription of at least 2 walks a day. Wow. Gosh, and really focused on Nessie and her needs, and also, connecting in with how being outdoors helps us all as human beings to get outside the 4 walls and so on. So onward and upward. We're just at the end of our webinar. Many apologies to Shannon, who's back with us now, but we're going to be able to connect up with her at a different webinar. So if we could move on to the next one, and we're very keen to hear whether there's any takeaways from today's webinar. So there's 2 things that we're going to ask you to do. One is to put in any takeaways, anything that struck you, some idea that you think, do you know what, I might investigate that further. I'm going to try this or this, or anything at all, any thoughts that you have. We're going to ask you to fill this in, and this is really important. And we're also, Jenny is going to ask you to fill out an evaluation form, which is a kind of a separate thing. And if you wouldn't mind telling us what you liked about the webinar, what we could do better, and any thoughts at all would be very, very helpful. And we're running these webinars on the back of what you have already told us, the things that you would value. So we'd be really interested to hear, what else and what would be useful to you. We'd also like, we'll at the end we'll give you our email address, because we'd be really interested to hear how you got on. Because if you try anything out, we'd love to hear about it. We'd love to hear what worked, what didn't, how you got along, how you kept going. And as we leave today's webinar, I'd just like to thank you again. We have heard stories from across different people across the sector, different places. And these are just, the top of an iceberg of wonderful work that's going on across different care services across the country. Thank you very much for your continuing good work. And we know that you know people so well. You work with people and families in such a holistic ways. And let's take forward that idea of continuing to be curious and continuing to be that detective, and really focusing in on each individual about what matters to them and what makes a difference to them. So it's been lovely having you with us here today. We will be offering more webinars and ways to connect going forward, and we always love to hear back from you. So Anij, maybe you could put our, the HSC email address in the chat, so you'll have that to hand. But we'd love to hear from you. And just to let you know, yeah, and I guess a lot of you are on our emailing list, so you'll continue to get invitations and so on. We love to see you. And can I also thank all the people who've been involved, who've contributed, and especially Jenny, who you didn't actually see, but is working away in the background to do all of this for us. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.